Much for coming to the final Centre for Poetry and Poetics reading for this particular academic year and term. So this is the closing event. It's meant to be a relaxing one, really, after last week's blast, which was a 3-hour long event to remember our friend Alex Houen. So this one is a little bit more laid back, and we will promise it won't last 3 hours, even though I could go on for 3 hours, as you know. A real joy and pleasure to welcome Adam Piette for the first reading, who is going to launch a very, very beautiful, well, I wouldn't say book, a thing really, that looks like that. You will need to sort of autopsy it, as we say in Hungary. So you actually have to sort of touch it and open it. It's going to be the first book tonight, which we're going to launch. And the book came out in 2023, exactly today, 2 hours ago, I think. And the publisher is Constitutional Information, and Michael Kindlen is here as well to celebrate and support Adam. So we're going to start with Adam, and then as a relay style, we're going to continue with me, and I'm going to launch my own book, and I'm going to MC myself as well. No, but more on that in a second. So this book came out a couple of months ago by Creator Press, Richard Parker's press, and I will say a little bit more when I come to that. And our third reader today is also launching not one book, but 2 books, sort of. We have got here Lisa Samuels, who was via some detour, was traveling from New Zealand. So a huge re-welcome or welcome back to you. Lisa's read here a couple of times a few years ago, and then before that a few years ago, and then we read in Nottingham. So this goes back to a decade now, but it's a good 10 years now. So Lisa is going to be launching or reading from, more precisely, Breach, which is a Boiler House Press publication. And yes, you will say a little bit more about this. And the very fresh thing, that almost as fresh as perhaps 2 days older than Adam's book, it's still also warm and has recently been tested and tried in London, which means yesterday it was launched in London, is Lisa's newest Shearsman collection, Livestream. So this is the order we're going to be reading from. Now, just to say, we're very poor poets, really, and we actually have got it's a launch, which means that we are trying to not just display the book, give you a sample of it, but if you actually like it, it would be really great if you could buy it. So you've got some samples of all the 4 texts in our kind of impromptu bookstore. We also have a broadside from last week's Alex Houen's event, so that Michael Kindlen will be dealing with that, but they're all on sale. I'm just gonna straight go into introducing. You don't really need an introduction, but I've decided to go for an introduction because it's a big event. It's a big thing for all of us to sort of welcome the Piette book into the world. So Adam Piette, if you don't know much about him, is a professor of modern literature at the University of Sheffield and is the author of Remembering and the Sound of Words, Mallarmé, Proust, Joyce, Beckett, Imagination at War, British Fiction and Poetry from 1939 to 45, A Literary Cold War, 1945 to Vietnam. He also is the co-editor of Blackbox Manifold, co-edits the International Poetry Journal, Blackbox Manifold with Alex Houen. And tonight, Adam will be launching Nights as Dreaming, which, as I said to you, just freshly has just come out of the press or whatever that thing is it was made by, because it's a little bit more complicated than that. So what Adam doesn't know is that I've got some blurbs on your book, and this blurb has been written by Michael. So I'm going to have to go for this a shorter version. But I just thought it was such a beautiful thing that I'm going to go for it. And after all, you all have got the right to celebrate tonight and take your time. So this is what Michael Kindlen says. Adam Piette's Nights as Dreaming is replete with movement that does not make sense. Its movements instead intrude forms of meaning beyond the physically possible. Mostly it reads like the remnant traces of some lovely reverie. The clue is in the title, you haven't quite stopped having. A dream whose interest is heightened by the possibility of unconscious combination, the act of threatening divine vengeance. The range here is everywhere expensive. At one point, she rises across liminal flows, and yet is also somehow tense. Even the voice, actual or subvocal, must work to achieve the ends of the lines, many of which clock in at 16 syllables, a number that feels at once motivated or inspired, given the poem's 15 sections, and yet also not unambiguously right. Significance in this work is literally inexact. The verse is tense in another grammatical way as well. The present time of the poem is sustained and defined by all manner of vague continuations. There are participles all over the shop. For example, this is a form of generosity. Nouns share their temporalities, pronouns their subject positions. This is the best. You are in this poem, but it is not you. It is Adam, it in a state of such total un-Adamness. It's like he's someone else. There is a diver too, but we don't know her, not really. These figures are, as the poem says, patterns that are difficult to parse. And just one tiny little thing. There is a little passage by Michael about the making of the book, and also the book's connection to the Alan Hall's images, but I will ask you to say a few words about that. But I thought, because I want to say something as well, Adam was very shy during the process of making this book, and occasionally just like thrown a few poems at me, or at some point during, I think it was last summer or about six months ago or so, I sort of saw the first draft of the whole thing. And so this was my initial reaction. Do you mind if I say this? This was my initial reaction to reading the book. Succulent, seductive, dizzying, flashy, but also hallucinogenic, deeply melancholic and heart-rending. What are these, Adam? Murmurs or reverberations of the most private nooks of the heart or the psyche, full of stoic quiet and desire and thought, perpetually propelling the poem ahead. Honestly, Adam, they have made me not so much weep, but more like hover and levitate in electrified intensity. The momentum of the poems is almost too much, overwhelming, irresistible, addictive. And all this sadness, this insatiable thirst and search for meaning, beauty, connection, these take you elsewhere, somewhere, a place that does not exist, only within your own poemscape. It's pure magic, pure beauty, literally, and the form is almost the embodiment of and for this sort of impossible perfection. They're mesmerizing and mesmerizingly devastating. They have made me speechless, again, literally. I am speechless, figuratively, absolutely wow. And when and how did you bloody write these, my dear genius friends? Hats off.
I think I'm going home now. I'm more upset reading anything. Yeah, just another bit of an intro though. It's really important that the fact that it was Michael's genius. The design of this is so beautiful. Each of the cards has my text, but has sort of an absolutely beautiful, entrancing image by Alan. And Alan agreed to this before he passed away, and was really interested in the actual material process. So if you buy this, you are actually buying these 15 absolutely beautiful images from a graphic genius. So I'm very the other person I just like to say thank to the reason I'm writing poetry at all is thanks to Australian poet Catherine Feidler, who passed away a couple of weeks ago, this reading is dedicated to her. I wouldn't possibly be writing without her, and it was kind of responsive. I'd write and she'd write, and it was a kind of to and fro ping pong, as it were. So I learned a lot from her, and so this strange rhythm is also of Nights' dreaming is something to do with a kind of responsiveness. So and there's sort of may she rest in peace. So Nights is dreaming. Night rises from the seas like sheets of dark rain, sweeping up crossed light, as figures batten down, read Keats, and fumble at their icy coats, dreaming deliverance, visions of waters, cheeks touch in the distance, and the dance, the breath of lovers, clouds roll, reveal where heavens meet, and deep blues, spirit riding heights. In shallows, the waters give glass bright movement and light to the sand. As rippling forms burgeon, so close, so magnified. Hissing sea sounds a delicate continuo to the mind, as the tang and the scent salt the skin's world. I find the clouds in the pool's mirrored face, the tide's quiet as soft night descends. The lake dreams its way to the sky while winding its time into waves, rippling light, humidity, breaths of fresh air. Blue that loves beams down small mercies under dangerous suns, such that bodies become seas and fluvially, unstructuredly landscaped and free. Mind liquefiably alive. The diver is floating and stares up there beyond sea surface. Sea at height, just his depth, she floats there. She's weightless and wispy, serene and dreamy like cloud. As she gazes from air and the blue that God made at the diver down there. There is peace in the translucent air and life in the transparencies. She lifts her great wings and she rises across liminal flows and heat vectors through this cutting air. Freshest mazes of fur far below. Her eyes track the giddy high sense of the scapes and the tactful motions. What tense for her living spectatorship. Ruffling breezes, she ravishes azure. Own world makes her. It's scripted ink paper blending, these spaces stain, voices careen, spiraling, scrawled, scrunched up, minding their own timeliness, screeds that frown back at you, terracotta statuettes with unearthed mirrors that stream tattered lights. I try and follow their can singing rises from dark ground that's mine. It's somber and quiet in the garden. Light flows as the masses shine. Mine dims as the shadows pause and fade, and it's not too late yet. The fan leaves spin and then ripple while air curls. That song dreams its own double as the stems and fronds gather perspective the eye made in this space that breathes in all I found. French lily smart in the swirl of the dust. What is that veering thing? Lakeside ballads undercurl love. Water churns text to ink, bubbling in the vortices. Green currents otterbite flesh to a burning. Me's and you's and oo's mesh. There's a flight of the eye, arriving late to the river I sing. On stone table circle, just out there, strikes the sunbeam. See it slash across slate mosaic. The cat considers the clouds' shadow rush as greens sink to blues. There's tide in the air. Solidifies as transparency where time stops quite still. All motes and gnats caught for this little ever. Hush. Sycamore sea hiss and high wind, slow sway of the pine against blue sky, copper leaves stamped to moss under aquafluency. The flow of peaty water over flesh. Orange feet freeze. A quivering in the so strange thorn trees announcing your new mind. Dusk lucid air and world below the clarity itself a call and urgency. Interdependencies of this air and light and environs peal like bells through the noise of thrashing sea hiss. You can't walk off care, can't paddle across to another spare world. See, feel this space here as connected. Yes, feel the earth flinch as you gently kiss. So that's the reading from this sequence, and just to move on to some other work. This is Cassandra and Articulation Energy. And it has a epigraph from Auden, the sound behind our back of glaciers carving. It would be the height, pedal shaman's teeth, stir depth and favor blindness as all caves in from captive skies. Clever the imaging, distorted sonic, bad land karma of the pinched cheeks, famished for a kiss or two before dark. Lighthouse sinking as the patches of vision flip and swerve left to us. Grim clouds quake, eat scrapers, stand down mountains as the sea surge bellows blue in face. Look at your hands, they dripping. Close eyes. Round the head, technocrats dance their Bayesian hates. Take comfort, if at all, from the total scene loved. Once, while the creatures sing their last sweet songs. This is a poem for my daughters called Missing. I lost two, and as an epigraph, Elizabeth Bishop, I lost two cities, lovely ones, and vaster some realms I own, two rivers, a continent. Repeat, return, revolve, and say again, they dress like Annie Lennox, Villanelle. Sing loss away, an in-depth love refrain. The voices in the garden air resound sweet rain, as though remembered just before it fell. Repeat, return, revolve, and say again. The song entwines its waves, undoes the pain, swirls round the empty space of Tourterelle. Sing loss away and in-depth love refrain. Their minds and hearts as keen and true as a strain, as harmonics can conceive, voice of bells, repeat, return, and say, revolve and say again. It's late, dusk darkens, stars emerge, moon wanes, shines fitful. Blackbird, wish my daughters well. Sing loss away, an in-depth loved refrain. Time turns the art of losing into gain. Watch the fluttering flight of pipistrelle. Repeat, return, revolve, and say again. Sing loss away, an in-depth loved refrain. Yeah. It's a poem about swifts with this is kind of a whole series with epigraphs, by the way. The epigraphs from Paul Blackburn, the wing, everything goes. Their soiree, scimitar, upsweep, hard-fletched veer and arrow thwack, with scythe strong downwash, vortex generent, snarl gape hunts, death mote, above all dream. So pricketh them nature in their courage. Oh, lovely swerves and faultless curves, seeking and seeking, into the sun your cry rings like a lyric's charred scream. Then cool clouds. And unihemispheric, you sway a little, sleep or luminous night with open eye, motionless, strange flight. Yeah, the next poem is working with Emily Dickinson. River flower sleeps on Sunset Hill. Blue the night, the river moon sleeps aurora down the hill. She waits for the resurrection. So graciously she's cancelled. Nonchalant exchange of the insects, spirits, trees. Witness still red morning's dews. Breezes humming strange in a. The strings surrender seas. As you watch me host, say, ecstasy. Hill winds right the landscape, as pang the purple lilies, cups of sea sun jealousy. Suspect smiles, night ruddier. How time sweeps secrets through me. Orchards have debauched her. Rhododendron mornings in Green River eyes. Supple is her orchid's flower. Notes, astonished, herself blue, grand sovereign whatsoever. So bluebird, spice broom, she who'll brave contending neighbors and fashions butterflies. Yeah.
Much as you want.
Yeah, this is a response to Jasper John's great painting in memory of my feelings, which is working with, obviously, with Frank O'Hara. I feed you smoke, you need it, spoon it up, my flagging spirits, charred air, as though I were alive in the now and here, times spooning you tickle, shades of shared embraces, oh, so light, sensitiveness at heart, skull of hunter, hunted serpentine. Hey, agree, why won't you? This burnt air is so delicious. Into this space, nation's history of knifing claims, scored erasure of mentalities, yes, so luscious. It swings close. Come eat with me, you hear? Grey strokes of shame on hinges made of mind at turn. Come eat the smoky air at this table. Draw yourself in, friend. Come in and fly on this stranger's carpet, till we meet again in the blank square, till, like lovers might, dawn, with the bad chill and nothing left inside, and underneath it all, these many selves lie sleeping dead flat on this plane. Yous, me's, they's in this made bed. I just it ends with what? Little timing. Yeah. So yeah, I'll finish with one more from another sequence. Sphere of amber, blue mirror, dreamy ceiling, imagination, supine, seeping brickwork, bold cream, sensations, shudder, creak, machine, blur, world, ear to eye, chords of cloud, bird song, ballad, tracery, manifest, high strung, columnar wishes, where mind seems everlasting, caress, heart shine, beyond material fear, junk bread of greased soul, breeze of death ret, inside intestinal core, dark tank, rust blown, each its own dear poison, step clear, free consciousness, green gauge light on open field, the hush of quiet evening, as starlings rise and flow, sink and swerve, inscribing their whole sign upon the receptive air, thankful swirl, caroling, wheeling line. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. No, I've got to put. Yeah, I've got to put another hat on. There's just be it's MC Aggie. Needs no introduction, but I'll introduce her anyway. Her poetry collections published in the UK are Budapest, Babel, Eggbox, 2008, Rememberer, 2012, Eggbox, Carillonneur, Shearsman Books, 2014, Swimming Pool, a great book, Shearsman 2017, 3 poetry collections in Hungarian. I won't. Yeah, those ones. She's the author of a monograph on Ágnes Lehóczky, Poetry, the Geometry of Living Substance, 2011. Winner of the Jane Martin Prize for Poetry at Girton College, Cambridge. The Pool Epitaphs and Other Love Letters pamphlet was published by Boiler House in 2017. She's also edited Sheffield Anthology with me. Poems from the City Imagined. Also, yeah, that's it, part of it. And recently, the world speaking back to Denise Riley with Boiler House, Wretched Strangers with J.G. Welsh, Boiler House 2018, and she's worked at the Roberts Institute of Art in London. She's senior lecturer in creative writing here. What she'll be reading from is Lata Biosas, or on Dreams and Lies, part of a larger project, and is published by Crater Press this year. This book is a spectral zone inhabited by dreams of rooms, urban spaces, mental space-times that offer paper and utopian projects for the homeless being in transit. These prose blocks describe paper squares of print as potential architectural holding courts for the transitional mind and its selves in hyperreal dream trajectories at several thresholds at once. Each poem has its tutelary spirit, whether it be Boyer, Notley, Robertson, Nelson, Riley, or Nemes Neige, who act as guides to the mind on its way among the bonds of words, through and by way of the afterlife scripts, negotiating strange, solitary, hermetic objects in these spaces suffering with the being on its way, the losses and laments of all that have been loved, enduring the difficult ghostliness of the plurality of fractured being within, toughening the failing will when challenged at the borders of the house of the body. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Adam. I told Adam when I first saw that text that it's better than the actual poems, but anyway, thank you. So just very briefly to introduce the book, it's part one of a much bigger sort of project. The sort of pencil title or draft title of the big project is, as Adam said, runs under the Poet's House. So La Rabiosas on Dreams and Lies, I will explain in one of the poems or through one of the poems. But La Rabiosas is Epicurus's term, means hidden lives or concealed lives or lives lived hiding. There's so many different translations to it. And Dreams and Lies is actually the two titles, Adam's books and mine. We haven't discussed this, but obviously there is sort of connections there. Will come from, you will get the explanation in a second by listening to one of the poems. I didn't know that we are allowed to read from the new sequence. I'm just going to be reading from this first sequence or first body of work, but I am working on the second one at the moment. So hopefully that will be out soon-ish. So. Well, I don't think I will. Just one more thing. All the three books, so Lisa's, mine, and Adam's, Adam's already explained his connection with the visuals by the images by Alan. Maybe you can tell a little bit more about yours. But when it comes to my photos, images in the text, which is my first book that has got this sort of multi-visual stuff in there. I was collaborating with a gallery, an architectural gallery in Budapest, which sort of specializes in contemporary urban architectural competition designs. So 4 years ago, I moved house back at home in Budapest, and I actually moved next to, in the 11th district, next to a square which was being redone at the time. So I got really obsessed with the square because it was named after one of my favorite fiction authors, Ottlik, a Hungarian novelist of the 60s and 70s and 80s, but also, and also because the square was designed as passages and motifs and tropes and metaphors from his writing. So it's actually not a hugely spectacular square, but it was spectacular for me. So I'm using the design from the two different competitions, from the second prize competition and the first prize competition. But also there are very private images in there, such as a cat called Shrew, and my swimming pool obsessions, and images fellow writers and friends were sending to me during the writing of the book. Everything is being explained in my obsessive compulsive endnotes at the very back, which are longer than the poems, as Alan would say. The footnotes, remember? The footnotes these days are longer than the poems. I remember this from last Thursday. Okay. So I'm gonna read either 3 or 4 poems only, but that should not reassure you, because my poems are really, really long. I'm gonna start with Women by the Window. Woman by the window. Woman by the Window is a 1952 Picasso painting framed within a poster I received in 2020 from Socrates. So, you know, Socrates is a friend of mine from Greece, but also it references Socrates at the same time. So from Socrates, as he said then, some sort of a reward for passing my viva with minor corrections, so heroically for the thesis I wrote on the modernist poet Ágnes Lehóczky. The thesis was called Poetry, the Geometry of Living Substance, a concept Lehóczky borrows, reappropriates from one of Goethe's essays on the correlation between organic and abstract entities, suggesting that the order, the form of the poems, takes shape as unfailingly, almost as violently as the symmetry of living organisms. We just have to pay attention to their regulators, and with all our creative force, we have to work out that structure, the valid one. The retro poster, which frames as frame within frame, a painting within the poster, within the room, within the house, within the poem, Picasso's Woman at the Window, was a design by UEA Sainsbury Centre from 1999 to promote the centre's exhibition entitled Dreams and Lies. Which with a typography in which the connective and a mono or micro syllable, which yet has some macro power to bridge disparate lexical semantic entities, i.e. to establish a sort of interdependence of meaning between these seemingly random, solitary, and otherwise hermetic objects. What you, and by you I also mean I, might call window, or in other words, a margin of brief opportunity such a micro word can ever offer, so that the world we are looking at can appear more total than a bunch of random parts or fractals, which you might also call a significant or even quietly dramatic occasion, a revivifying opening, or even liberating break, which you might go as far as to call a prospect or panorama, was so faded that the word became almost invisible. Picasso's Woman in At the Window, made with sugar leaf, aquatint and dry point at François Gillot, a painter herself whose figurine appears in various other abstracted portraits by Picasso. From the angle I am looking at her is standing by the window, looking out at the world, not quite taking part or half taking part, half hiding, visible and invisible, depending, or so I assume, on how much the woman at the window wishes to reveal or conceal of herself, a choice Hannah Arendt suggests of I will at some sort of self-exile that is entirely and ultimately yours and not mine. At times, the black and white face of this woman in the window disappears and reappears again, depending on the angle of the sun, as well as on Picasso's choice at that predetermined moment. The outline of the body fractures and, shedding its own origin, morphs into its own obscure double, into the contours of someone else, a stranger, an Eleatic visitor perhaps, who has all the while been waiting for her to join, to reunite with her. Like some multi-headed anonymity, it has two or more of everything: foreheads, pairs of giant eyes and earlobes, monstrously large black hands, each finger and thumb multiplied, breasts with pointy nipples, chins, noses, two of all internal organs, lungs and pancreas, her soul doubled two, now a twin room, which turns into her future or prospective tomb, as promise or dream fulfilled in Augustine's city of God. Even her skills pattern blouse appears twice, both times half unbuttoned, and her guilt, or is it rage, or lust, or fury, or desire, too, perhaps reappears quasi unveiled, all at once duplicate, invisible contours of some facsimilar shame, some silent historic aversion, resistance, confrontation even. The whole performance you and I might think of as some kind of lonely, inaudible solo act of disobedience performed in some aroused state of oblivion, as a double act on canvas, while there is one and only body. It seems as if it were multitasking with the multiple presence, one of her standing inside, the other standing outside, and the one vision of the whole figure or face is that of unity, symbiosis of these two seemingly disparate and yet similar movements, which for now I will call the woman's choice of being in two places at once. Later, when you look again, and when I say you, I also mean I, the woman, by now both animate and inanimate, by which I also mean both concrete and abstract, who was standing behind the window, has already gone, entered the outside. So she's not so much looking at the outside from the inside, but having been inside for so long, she's now still standing there, just now behind the same glass on the other side, looking back at the same and only glass the woman at the window inside is looking at. Not so much looking inside, but looking at the inside with a semi-dreamy gaze in a moment which you may call the moment of recognition, which remains at this point only a promise or a chance, i.e. it remains only an intuition of the nameless woman standing at the window, who appears as if for a second she were made of this glass. The book actually doesn't start with this poem, but one that focuses on, it was a kickoff for me, Emmanuel Gattari's I, Little Asylum, which is a sort of semi-poetic, semi-prosy memoir on her father, the psychiatrist Guattari. So this is a continuation of the first poem. In one of the hallucinatory snapshots of I, Little Asylum, the memoirist Emmanuel Guattari recalls a dream, even though it is difficult to say where this dream as event takes place post-institutionalized childhood time or during, or whether the act of recalling occurs somewhere between analepsis and prolepsis, i.e. in some imaginary or fictionalized narrating presence, or in or form, or in or from the viewpoint of some achronological outside, in which this other phantom-like Emmanuel, as if she were made of some strange dreamlike substance too, while getting lost in the vast premises of the psychiatric ward of La Borde, disguised as a castle situated somewhere in the Loire Valley in France in the second half of the past century, spots one resident, aka insane, standing outside the building, also wandering, looking a little lost in the rain. It takes Emmanuel long moments to recognize that the figure of the madman, wandering seemingly lost in the same rain she is lost in, the aka insane resident, is actually her father, the very former, albeit then posthumous therapist himself. The moment of recognition, which you may call intuition, naturally is the moment of terror and tremor fused with confusion, since Emmanuel knows, or all at once remembers after or during the actual event or non-event, given it was taking place as a dream, that her father, aka madman, former and by now posthumous, yet in the dream still pre-mortem psychiatrist, is meant to be already long dead. Yet this figure, lost and wandering in the rain, who wears the contours of her father, looking half dead, half alive, ghost-like, is insisting he is hic nunc real, that he is literally here being caught up or arrested in what Benjamin would refer to as the momentum of a so-called jet site or nav time, even if Emmanuel records his apartment was sold a long time ago. The epiphany or catharsis, or the anti or lack thereof, is not so much in the dreaminess of the dream, but the sense of new reality which does not belong to either the present or the past, a kind of hyper-reality with which it wakes Emmanuel and enters your own dreaming. And from this moment on, which is not quite your own choice, you cease to be the reader and become part, or more precisely, a character, protagonist, memoirist even of Emmanuel's own fictional memoir, so much so that the same fear or dread of the dream Emmanuel feared is passed on to you, so much so that when you wake from Emmanuel's own terror, which is now yours, post-dream, post-memoir, post-actual or hyper-real event, somehow the tremor stays with you for days or weeks or even longer, so much so that you begin fearing the return of Emmanuel's spectre father, returning not only to Emmanuel's life and memoir, but to yours too, who is by now in your darkness dread, standing on your threshold, wearing only a hospital gown, half open, with its left sleeve reaching out towards yours, moving inch closer, stepping inside from the outside, insisting he has just been literally taken off the mechanical ventilator, the breathing machine, in other words, that he, and by he I mean the spectre, is here to rearrange the structure of your life and arrange it all back to how it used to be. All will be fine, you'll soon get used to it, you'll see. The whole scenario is an implausible, hollow, by which I mean, strictly speaking, eventless or even timeless event, or more like eerie interlocution, which takes place, of course, by now your own inner memoirist insists much later, or in fact much earlier than you actually recall or can at all remember this non-event, which yet still feels like a concrete or real encounter, since you can recall it taking place, or even if it took place in a dream. But then, isn't this you? And by you, I also mean I, who is trying to remember an event correctly and accurately, and even more so acutely, but by which I mean in accordance with what really had taken place in the past, and even more so paradoxically, which took place only as non-event, a dream, like the Eleatic visitor of your own dreams in Hannah Arendt's The Life of the Mind, a figure of a stranger she reappropriates from Plato, who sees things, and by things I assume Plato also means people, and by people I, and by the pronoun I also mean Plato, means ghosts. And in fact, by ghost, I also mean the apparition or manifestation of one's own phantom self or selves in a dream, and things that he knows them perfectly. And then when he wakes up, and by he, I naturally also mean I, all confused and lost, I find that I know absolutely nothing. And I'm going to make an attempt to read the final poem, if I have got the time. And this poem, for tonight, at least, is for my student. And I think you will know why when I start reading it. Watch out for the ending. It's as if we were constantly. This is a long poem, so I'm going to try, and if I seem to struggle from time to time, it's because I'm trying to skip bits. And I'm going to have to lift the book because you're right, Lisa, I can't see anything. It's so small, the font. And these are for distance thing. It's as if we were constantly waiting for life to happen. It's as if we were constantly waiting for life to happen, writer friend Ethel Makeda said on a train journey in a frosty January morning back in 2019, as we were traveling in one of the 4 tiny coaches of a grotty old East Midlands train, as if in a compact time capsule to a reading we were about to give in Norwich's medieval Dragon Hall for the city's writer centre to launch the anthology JT and I entitled Wretched Strangers, a post-Brexit collection of poems to commiserate recently reinstated national and political paranoia in the collective psyche of the British Isles about, among other things, physical and non-physical, fictional and non-fictional borders. The book of poems with JT and I had, which JT and I had planned or imagined to be a sort of virtual building or temporarily built house, accommodation, a halls of poets' residence, thematically assembled a collection of poetries on the reconfigured peculiar state, life and psyche of the postmodern bios xenikos, to borrow Aristotle's term, i.e. that of the exiled human who, both as an outsider and an insider, i.e. reenacting, mimicking the role of the spectator, lives as phantom citizen at lines of limits, parameters, on outskirts, i.e. perpetually on edge. As if, as Hannah Arendt writes in the subchapter, Where Are We When We Think, in the book which never got to be finished in the author's lifetime, even though who is to say what completion is, this sort of perpetual waiting Ethel mentioned on the train locked us into a time continuum that made us live the present as some sort of lifelong fight against the dead weight of the past and the fear of future, a lifelong waiting, struggle, fight, or struggle, fight, or even grieving that essentially does not allow one to be able to comprehend the lived moment, because, or thus, Arendt adds, somewhere in the same intricate subchapter, in the life of the mind, calling on Merleau-Ponty's phenomenology, in which we explore the concept of le corps propre, i.e. one's own body in the world, somewhat paradoxically as perpetual openness, perceptual experience, rather than, or perhaps exactly despite being a logged-in presence, one is not capable, perhaps because of this openness, of fluidity, or constant movement, of capturing, comprehending reality, namely one's own being in the present, taking place in the now as qua reality, which is precisely what Arendt continues, again, quoting Merleau-Ponty, makes one truly lonely. This is essentially the true source or the focal point of one's solitude. As if one were living one's entire life in a fluid or liquefied morning id, paradoxically in the house of a language that at the same time fails to, as Bernstein writes in Shadow Time, a thought opera in which the protagonist, aka Bernstein, morphs into a version of fictionalized Benjamin mourn, and thus fails to allow one to mourn too, as if, as Ethel says, we spent our entire life waiting for life to happen at last, or as if we were constantly on a train journey stuck, or perhaps more like floating, unarrested inside the cube, unsettled, anxious, agitated in some sort of final or finalized house or language-shaped tabernacle or sepulchre, almost as if one was buried or certainly somehow preserved inside alive, waiting for, or perhaps even dread, as we say, the light to appear at the other end of this so-called tunnel or corridor-shaped space-time, one's own biographical, biological lifetime. Or as if it occurs to me, one were living one's life as if one were not herself, but someone else. Or as if it occurs to me, one was non-biographically dreaming through one's own biographical life. Or as if one were dreaming that one is living one's own afterlife in one's real life, a sort of afterlife. For instance, Benjamin begins to live in Bernstein's Shadow Time, as if having passed the limits of both before and afterlife, after his own kata or anabasis, depending on where you are, into this other life, having already lived his own real or idiosyncratic life, turning back for a brief second, his face semi-lit, semi-concealed in the dark or in shade in the cube or the darkness of a tabernacle, from the realm of an underworld, i.e. Benjamin, turning back towards you, towards the reader too, from inside, and the depth of Bernstein's thought book. A somewhat tomb or crypt-shaped script he had composed, built, dramatized, set up, fictionalized for a fictitious Benjamin, long gone as a real one. We're trying to say something back to the living he may have forgotten or had no chance to say while still alive. Or as if one were dreaming that one was dreaming, as if not so much, and perhaps there is no more to it than this. Life itself, the one we live and the ones others live, were made of the strange substance dreams are made of, or it, or certainly most of it rounded in a single sleep. Nevertheless, Arendt points out, this life as dream is a concept or motive which goes back to as far as ancient Asian philosophy. And on the same page, she records the well-known dreaming incident or scenario with Taoist philosopher Chuang Tzu, who post-dreaming, having just dreamt in a dream that he, as a character called Chuang Chou, was a happy butterfly. I, now being awake as Chuang Cho, again carries on living his life, not knowing anymore, or perhaps having become confused or even forgotten whether he was really Chuang Cho who had dreamt he was a butterfly, or whether he actually was a butterfly who dreamt that he was Chuang Cho, and thus again post-dreaming Chuang Tzu adds as some sort of conclusion or resolution to the mystery via Arendt that there must be a distinction between the two of them, a two of himself somewhere, and off he goes spending the rest of his out of dream lifetime trying to work out an answer about the dream and or his life as a dream. Or as if I could add, one was some sort of a stranger, an intruder, an imposter even, a somewhat unwelcome nuisance guest in one's own company. And by one's own company, I mean the company of these two, what Arendt again refers to as the company of the two in one, Chuang Chu, Chuang Tzu. Or as if one were dreaming the dreams of someone else in one's own dreams, like I too often do. I, for instance, in one of the most recent Chuang Tzu type of dreams, which happened admittedly after having fallen asleep in the middle of reading 3 books at once late at night, all 3, needless to say, set in a stifling setting of psychological wards. And I'm going to skip the long, elongated details of the books I was reading, which is about a page and a half in brackets. So I was dreaming in my dream that I was, and I promise I'm going to get to the end of it. So I was dreaming in my dream that I was someone else, that I was or became, or all at once I turned inter alia into a Denise figurine. Or more precisely, in the dream, as peculiar as it may sound, not so much, for instance, like Lisa Robertson's female dandy author protagonist in the recently published Baudelaire Fractal, who announces in the opening chapter of the book that she, i.e. the female dandy author protagonist, aka fictionalized Hazelburn, aka non-biographical Robertson, is not so much Baudelaire himself, but for a matter of fact, she is the protagonist of Robertson's Baudelaire Fractal, is the author of Baudelaire's entire body of work. But even if only for the duration of a few minutes of the dream, or of the duration of a short-lived snooze or nap itself, I began to live the life of someone else. And thus, in this instance, I begin to live the or a version of the life of this so-called Denise figurine. In or during the dream narrative, as it happens, while there were 2 of me, one who is being chased and one who was reenacting the chasing. In this instance, the subject of the chase was this Denise figurine. There was a stiff distance between chaser and the one suffering the chase, i.e. between the 2 of us, which during the course of the walk, which you may call stalking, and really by stalking, I mean some sort of longing to be other than myself, in this case, the one being chased rather than the one who is doing the chasing, never shrank. It stayed with us, between the 2 of us, throughout the entire dream. The incident itself was jammed in between 2 other uneasy dreams in which this I, and by I don't so much mean the horizontal I who was doing the dreaming, but an alternative, pathological or irrational I who has been dreamt of, was having to face various imaginary scenarios of my voluntary and or, it's not funny by the way, compulsory redundancies from my job in academia, having been called in by senior members of staff to some sort of interrogation with the usual dramatized, stereotypical, theatrical prop and stage apparatus, something of a scene from the 1950s somewhere, nowhere in Central Europe. Bright desk lamp in a semi-lit, semi-concealed room of institutionalized drama shoved into my face, piles of documents, paperwork, worksheets, printed out poems from my teaching material on the desk, waiting to be scrutinized, and finally, the cathartic moment of confession to whether I have or not or misconfigured the ancient discipline as ancient as human civilization called writing. That I should admit to teaching inappropriate pedagogies, that writing is eros and derives from the same source, force or energies as affection, or affection one invents into and or acquires from the erotic, see Phaedrus, or that writing is communally solitary and poets are collectively antisocial, nonconformist, agoraphobes, amoraphobes, or that the current minister of loneliness should quit, and that I had coerced my own students to write a formal complaint which claimed that the current minister should be replaced with this Denise figurine I was dreaming of in my dream. And just in the moment when I was told in the nightmare I was soon having to face the prospect of becoming jobless, i.e. some paperless citizen, I moved into the philosopher of grief in the middle of one of her city flâneries. By now, not so much stalking her, but becoming her, and by her, not so much her, I mean, but the movement of the walk the philosopher took, or not so much the entire walk as experience or series of physical events, but it was just that I became the walk's trajectory, some sort of irregular map, random topography. She, this Denise figurine, as if my own, one could say, desired other, this inner stoic, some sort of soulmate or co-spirit, was choosing impromptu that day, the shape of her own random psychogeographical choices, the formation of her private decisions, or the decision-making itself, her grief itself, the traces of her thinking or feeling even in the moment, the flight of her being in the now, some kind of jet sight or no time, that of a true situationist, these choices taking place in some strangely weightless, liberating, self-liberating eloquence, silent persuasiveness, wordless articulacy, performed by an illusionary, disappearing, transmuting sense of self, a self in the process of undoing itself, as if by a skilled escapologist, escaping not only a pinned down self of the self, but being pinned down by a self, which could potentially become pinned down by purely writing itself down. That's not the end of the poem, but I'm going to stop here. Thank you. I'm glad that's over. Thank you. So I am now back to the MC in me. It's okay. And I can relax now fully and introduce Lisa Samuels to you. Lisa has read here before, but so this is the second time, and it's really, really lovely to have you here tonight. So Lisa works with experimental writing, multi-modal art, and relational theory in transnational life. She's the author of 14 books from, for example, just to mention The Seven Voices, one of the early works by O Books from 1998, to Breach, which was a 21 Boiler House collection, and of course the one that we are celebrating here today, as well as many poetry, chapbooks, and influential essays on theories of power, interpretation, and the body. Lisa Samuels regularly collaborates with composers and movement artists, edits literary work, and performs internationally. Lisa's novel Tender Girl is newly published in Serbian, and it was a 2022 translation by Milan Pupezin. A new poetry book, Livestream, which we're partly celebrating tonight, was out a few days ago by Livestream by Shearsman Books. And the book of her selected essays, Imagining What We Don't Know, Creative Theory and Critical Bodies, is forthcoming with Punctum Books. Lisa Samuels is Professor of English and Drama at the University of Auckland in New Zealand. And just to say also a few words about the bodies or the two texts themselves, Breach, the earlier text, the Boiler House text by Lisa Samuels, performs a vital parallelia of lockdown, starting with the dead, with Li Wenliang, who was the first to raise the COVID alarm. The book pitches and surges in deflections, hungers, and political feeling through pandemic as ordinary life. It is a song of lockdown, its tragedies, absurdities, non sequitur linguistic hilarities, and nightmarish lexical distortions, presented at a perfect moment for reflection as we each continue to adjust our bodies, lives, and breaths. But Livestream, the second book we will hopefully hear Lisa reading from is a digital capture thrown elsewhere, body fluids that charge being and planetary liquid flows. Livestream's poetry entangles with those phenomena. The poems erupt, stagger, hold, and reflect as they evoke events and responses distributed through bodies and ethical borders. How language conjures us and how we sense with it is Livestream's constant ecology. The photographs in the book are resonators and witnesses. Very warm welcome to. Thank you.
All right, hello. Thank you for being here. And thank you, those who are online. Lovely to see you there. And if you need to get up, stand up, and go use the loo, whatever, breathe, move your body, please do so. Right, you can just do that. So it's a real pleasure to be here. And thank you, Adam and Aggie. It's a great pleasure to read with both of you. And to feel the resonances and differences among the works. I was even thinking when we were talking about the titular resonance that life's dream also is sort of going along in a zeitgeisty way, perhaps, with your titles. So I did just launch this last night in London, and my wonderful publisher, well, Tony Fraser and many other people's wonderful publisher of Shearsman Books, surprised me by saying, and Lisa will say some things about the book. So I'm probably going to say more about it tonight than I did last night. I read in a different sort of way. So I'll just say that entanglement and simultaneity were one of the things that was going on when I was working on this book over a long period of time. And one of the things I imagined about it at a certain point was that it was a kind of narrative in verse. And in fact, I wanted the titles to be sort of motile, kinetic, and connected, to be legible all the way across the book. And the remnant of that is that Tony kindly moved the titles away from the left margin. I mean, I had it like that, and he sort of left margined them, and I said, actually, can you bring it back? Because I'm doing that on purpose. I want to be able to read across the whole book, as well as the poems in their, poemic state. Yeah, so just those things. So I'm going to start with, although this is just the new one, I'll start with this, and then I'll read a little bit from Breach as well. The person drops the door like a knife in the clouds. You can find the door outside after caned violet dive from air to earth. 1 dot, 2 dots, the ground cold hisses, a premise to enter, sonic muscles, marble in the tongue. Your eye loom listens, awkward as 100 dots, thoughtful as a phalanx, soft thermometers to wait. Gorge time. Scouring the planet's nerve geometry in the same speakshore out of which some clods turn on the side to rest, the double touch veins umwelt, out of which throbs the voice is overfaint, turns on its side to speak, air, sounds, pitch, strums, barks. At the stump, the head with the cut salve, 2 hearts in its sockets, eyes like cream, clear seeing out of the way, entirely abscess, quiet, very quiet, completely silent. Blue fields peel off their arithmetic. Put your mouth over everything. That's how everything puts its mouth over you. Boom, lift. Her hair impeaches atrophy. Narrow, skin bliss, semi-flush, immaculate coloratura. You could go as movement, fold the bright peaks of air blue, push soft movement. Pitching at the brink a little faster, disaster, unscored server, never even personing his smile tag, glass cheeks also crack, that trend core maybe stupefy, an amuse-bouche without the bird trees hunker shoulder to shoulder, speck thrill, tin head in full verdure. Slurry. Donning one skin suit after another, I liked the one entirely casing, warm with fur on the inside. The wall kept opening apart from where we were, yet the skin held without any protest, crazy armature, the sleek lines of the catalog bray as to live without convincing exactly, like omnificent barter. My felt skin bruised the shred bins, pitch the spur in an awkward posit. We put the sandstone, sure, to make a cut through. We put on instructions for skin. Inside, at the window, holding toward us, hot at the wall, we flip the switch. Kind provenience, know what to say. The thick paper of soft friends rolling warm dispersals through a ready-made crust of life, air floss in the crinkly, soft, fluorescent blue, dumps its audacity nearer to the mirror, dark as instruments, heart on the least stripped out rectangle of memories flashing like red and white, fair play, like a word is an egg that gives birth to other eggs, tattooed with its credibly obliviated skeleton, hysterical intimacy. Oh, ta, really, thank you. Whereas volcanoes, earthquakes are not. The kite hit the air with the velocity of strangers, smash, buffet, whole arm leaf very low to the beach. The surf parses, salt-caked, cord for air, a hirsute silver cloud sky where wings would anchor the green tea and the coffee toast, an orange parallel of sound, the dead leather of the taffeta, to wash oneself clean of another incident, faces rubbing at each other like proprietary mechanics, the warmly moving black salt greenlit bush hunks on the ground, wind that shakes it like a mother with the wrong hands. Moratorium. Doves really know. Lean, so told their heads, concomiters, so told each crack. Flighting the outline, curled jetties, red boots, slip. Cloth map spread on dirt blanks, bass screamish, sound breath. In a painting of this, green trees, nomenclate foreclosures, arboretum, sack, ontology, road strands, so there or charred lays, on the ground hairs, spoon tally granules. Talk without voices. Like big noise is the only faux semblance, building a resistant fort d'art, just like that, I admit. Protagonist and nerves crouch carefully on the dimmer switch. A new pyre of trust. Ceramic pebbles chirp, entire, odds on change, hair cascading with black water. You push your face against another just to breathe. The fog blows slowly, smooths its entrance with wide move, fields slicing open to reveal history. Your speculative harmonics tangle in the stream. What you see and what I see are similar distance from what attracts these words. I admit, for all we know, twinkling, pleasuring askers, push the cart into the sea, push the sea into the sea. Ides. Kickstart premonition. You've been heavy beauty, stomped to death like a composition for voices, holding off, hold off. A fan shawl, flutter it, hatted for the flare, meme, haggard timetables wrought on the same explanation, the shaking, sympathetic beam of heads. That bright spot war aspect, we rush next, our limbs all tuned to circles. The first burst of studying the flax motion mask binds you stony on the curve. Any other time we slide the banister, dot our suitable hair-swept dust bin, forever throwing a plate breath on to cover that. Not much pain inside this curtsy, lo, the lovely derangement stone of charities double-pitched, a contemporary model of bush grown on your skin against the shiver. Skywriting. See the faces slide into another. Huzzas with strong plaisir, a window full of stories. Trying to run the ink out of this pen, you'll get a whole new dialect without elastic tears, desire maps, or inchoate barometers. Caliente, acorn dust, faire sentir fumes, knife the air, dallying with spine. The prepared throat smiles, hard to port. Blue, silver, white, blue, plain, sight, paralyzed to requirement. The safety of anonymous coaxing glances. Soar my gaze, I eat a bitumen sandwich, sliced fine in the rain of transit, in the foggy dust. And the last poem from Livestream for now, Earth Writes. I told the swallow to fly to the solid cloud. I swallowed. Vehicular sight, smacking the doomed grass with a fresh coat of paint. Swimming in the air, albeit for a river rose, skimming blue-white tillage, I told the swallow, go there really fast. The swallow desired its own wings and swallowed. So, Breach, very much unlike Livestream, was written in a short matter of days. It's the most visionary book I've ever done. That is to say, good night. No, it's all good. I said, get up, dance, breathe. In the sense that it happened in April 2020 in the first lockdown in New Zealand. It's very much a COVID pandemic lockdown work. And it's a book-length poem. It's one poem. And was composed that way and is presented that way. So I'll read just a bit from Breach. And as I thanked Tony Fraser of Shearsman, I thank Nathan Hamilton of Boiler House for seeing this book through and bringing it out. He is glad that I can finally speak it, especially maybe here in the UK, where it came to exist not quite 2 years ago. The globe's a round thing with fuzzy coordinates proliferating. It's a mirror, look, the ambulatory memes crawl on your skin. Each story draws the attributes of Lent around the next box, your attempts. You open 2 eyes, spoon bowls inside your head mouth. Every hole turns page blank tributes, hone on pull, the script, the blow-through hull, whose phenoscope arrears on flags. A code does all the buildings, raw, tweaked, pharmacy, flut, sidewalk, flesh in a trance, the shred fabric clothes, the hungry methadone child, all pre-transfigured, none in the arms, chalk, wheel, head, harder outlines. To be too true, come back, light shift, sun shards, shred continuity, laugh for cause, the curled body lumped on the major bed, windows already splint with elemental efficacy, permission from what's outside weighs in, the houses tipped and allocate, body calling, names continue. On the floor ground, all the mysteries won out of life, the like gritty, congealed micro-furniture swabs one's skin, giving a hint of glassy futurity. You often hear that slime is lovely, that it consummates noses, snails, throats, the quick, clear cream of the blister. So that's futurity for you, rolling on the sidewalk again. The streets full of symbolic deer paths, trodden, cheerful as money, one frame, 1 foot, ghosts the next, your attic, lung, slime, tweets, breathing, like the amphibrac. It's truly impatient to continue. Even underneath your scheme face, doctor, nurse, we salute you without being anywhere near the border. The grief, lockdown, and groceries are not the same, yet salt applies to your face, anything foraging, that room in the compound complex sentence, marbate, roll around, outside, periwinkle, asinine, sky thoughts. Lawn attributes at top, tall buildings, skip heart like the green moniker, strives, thump, thump, the earth bumps, preggers with gift, piling near that top. But hold, keep the rooftop buggers, cossy, the fold, fair, green, purpose names arriving. The farm door co-sack vents, throatmen, openers settle in yawns, the lungs crack, anonyms, without thought, apart. Feral wheels trip up dogs' mercury, distal brew lands spot on, insoluble leaks into comestibles, pathways, upend, then scurry home. All the blues are after yous, polite, see? Holding for your friendships, sailing your nuns away. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and thank you, Adam. I just wanted to say thank you to Michael, but he just ran out. And thank you to me, and thank you to you. And also, just wanted to say a huge thank you to our online audience. It's lovely to see some familiar names as well. So thanks for coming. I think we are gonna take a breather until October now, but we will be back. Okay, thanks. Oh, and of course, we actually have got a little time, not like last Thursday,